Africa has a very long-standing relationship with the Bible, and there are African tribes that trace back their lineage back to the Bible. For example, the Lemba tribe of Zimbabwe traces back its lineage to the biblical figure Aaron, who is the brother of Moses, and genetic studies have been done in this tribe, and they've checked their oral traditions, and they've been found to be very similar to the Jewish people of today. There's also the Beta tribe of Ethiopia that traces its lineage back to the lost tribe of Den, and they basically are said to be one of the lost tribes of Israel, and their customs are very similar to the customs of the Jewish people today. But there are also slight variations and differences that make this tribe very unique, and it has also led to them being a bit isolated by the Jewish people of today. But today we're going to be looking at the influential figure, the Queen of Sheba. Now, the Queen of Sheba is probably the most influential figure in terms of the influence of Africa in the biblical narrative. The Queen of Sheba is well attested in multiple religious sources. You can find her in the Quran, you can find her in the Hadith, in Sahih Bukhari. You can also find her in the Kebra Nagast, which is an Ethiopian tradition as well. And the earliest source that we have today is actually in the Bible. It's in the book of Kings, chapter 10, and you can see from verses 1 to 13. Also, you can find it in the second book of Chronicles, chapter 9, verses 1 to 12. But the Queen of Sheba is somebody who traveled from her kingdom to meet with Solomon, to hear about his wisdom, to see the vastness of his kingdom. And she was somebody who was fascinated by the wealth and the wisdom of Solomon. Now, the Bible doesn't really tell us about a romantic relationship between these two people. But if you look at other sources, like the Kebra Nagast, for an example, will say that they had a romantic relationship, they had a son together, and this tradition has been used to make a claim for some kings in Ethiopia to establish the Solomonic dynasty, if you will. And a lot of those kings, most of the influential kings of Ethiopia have actually come from this dynasty. So people like Haile Selassie would have come from that dynasty. Also King Menelik II is also somebody who's said to be in that lineage as well. So there have been very influential people who've come from that lineage. But whether they had a son or not, whether they had a romantic relationship or not, the Bible doesn't actually tell us. But if you look at the Islamic sources, we see that, or we're told that the Queen of Sheba worshipped the sun and the moon. And so she was basically somebody who was converted to the belief in one true God. So she actually abandoned her beliefs in the sun and the moon, and then basically said, back at home, we worship the sun, we worship the moon, and you can also find this in the Kebra Nagast, but we will now worship the one true God, the God of Israel. And the Kebra Nagast does tell us that she went and converted her whole nation. And so this is how Ethiopia basically began to believe in the one true God, or the God of Israel. And this is very fundamental, because when we read the book of Acts chapter 8 with the Ethiopian eunuch coming up to Jerusalem, we're told that he went to Jerusalem to worship. Why is an African going all the way to Jerusalem to worship? Why is he not worshiping in Africa? Who is he going to worship in Jerusalem? And so it's pretty clear that Africans already worshipped or believed in the God of the Bible even before the missionaries came. Even before Christianity came, the God of the Bible was already present in Africa. And then further on, we're told that he was in possession of the book of Isaiah. And the book of Isaiah obviously is a Bible. So he was in possession of the Jewish Bible, and he could read the Bible. And so already we can see that the Bible didn't come to Africa, at least the Old Testament didn't come to Africa with the missionaries, but it was already present. And Africans could read it, whether they could read it in their own language, whether they could read it in Hebrew. But we can see that there's this long-standing tradition which you're not going to find in Roman tradition or Greek tradition, which we have as Africans as well. Now this is important because the Queen of Sheba lays down the groundwork for Christianity to come to her kingdom through the Ethiopian eunuch, because after the Ethiopian eunuch is converted, we're told that he went back, or not necessarily told that he went back, but we know that he went back to his kingdom and he then established Christianity as well. And so we can see from there, if you look at the Bible, Christianity comes to Africans in the book of Acts chapter 8, but it comes to the Greeks in Acts chapter 17, and then only in chapter 28 does Paul actually go on a missionary journey to Rome, and that's when they receive it. And so you can see that we Africans received the gospel before, way before the Greeks and the Romans. And so this is maybe a response that we can use to people who say Christianity came with the missionaries, but we can see that it was actually Africans who brought it to Africa with them.